Hello and welcome to another tier list. So it's been a while since I've done one of the inheritable skills tier list for base game. So let's do that. Let's see if anything has changed. Let's see if things have moved up or down, in my opinion, based on playing the game for over 1,300 hours on Maddening mode. All right, so the very first skill, Alacrity. Alacrity as an unlock, I think is not good. I never get it. I don't recommend getting it. You're better off taking some chip damage, to be honest, because if you can consistently one round, like if you're already consistently doubling, getting Alacrity unlocked is just going to waste your SP, and you're better off just running more speed, more damage, more durability, so that you can enemy phase better, so that you can one round more consistently, so that you can enable some kind of build. So this only works on fast units who already double, and most of those units want damage fixing. And you're much better off running something like Canter over this. So if you're already doubling and you just have damage fixing as your first passive, your second passive should be like Canter or some kind of utility. Alacrity is not going to be very useful, and I honestly think it's one of the worst skills in the game. And unless you're getting it for free from Lyn, in which case it's great. But outside of that, I don't think it's good at all. There's really no advantage to it. It just prevents you from taking damage on the counter attack. That's it. So, and I've never found this useful across all of my playthroughs. The only time it could be is if the rest of your team can't clean up the other enemies in the area. Otherwise, you know, you can just heal off the damage. Maybe you open with a break too. Maybe you're attacking at 2 range. Like, there's all these different situations where this isn't very good. Alright, so what is this one? Arts Mastery? Or no, Arts Focus. This one, this is terrible. You should never use this. It's worse than Alacrity. Grants hit plus 30 at the cost of dodge minus 10, so that's the max rank. Art's already fairly accurate. The characters who are good at using them tend to have high dex. This is basically useless. Sword Focus, definitely better than Art's Focus, but not also like similarly pretty bad. So hit plus 30 on swords. Also consider dodge minus 10 as incoming crit plus 10. So that's not, that's pretty terrible actually. That's really bad. You don't want that, and sword's already accurate, so you just don't need this ever. Let's see, this is not bow focus, this is bow agility. So bow agility gives you increased avoid at the cost of crit. Let me just find it. I have the thing over here just so that I can reference, because I'm going from memory, but I also have all the passives. Bow agility. Here we go. So avoid plus 30, crit minus 10. All right, so I was right about that. Now, avoid tanking on a bow. I'm gonna put that in high D tier. The bow is not an enemy phase weapon unless you can set up 2 and 3 range enemy phases consistently against other ranged units, which can be kind of difficult to do because ranged units are mixed in with melee units. So you're probably getting smacked by those. So the only case this could be useful is if you have an archer that's getting attacked at range, and even then it's like situational. There's better things to avoid tank, and this is just way too situational for it to be good. Advance. So this is from Roy. Move 1 space when making a melee attack. So let's say you have like 5 move, right? This lets you move 6 to melee, but it doesn't let you move to do a 2 range like physical attack with like a bow or, you know, daggers or something like that. This I would say is also D tier. I've never used this. Even when I have Roy, maybe I've used Advance like once, but it's very rarely useful. And as an unlocked passive, unless there's like a really good reason for using this, I just don't see it being helpful at all. So I don't recommend using it. Demolish. Demolish I also think is D tier. It's just not, it doesn't do anything really. Like, yes, it destroys junk immediately. Maybe that's useful in LTC, but there's very few, like after you get this, there's very few things that you can actually break and destroy in mainline chapters. Maybe there's a few in some paralogs, but mostly there's just not enough things to break that this is ever useful really. So I just don't think it's very good. Favorite food, I think this is, oh wait, hold on. Actually, yeah, this is decent. This is okay. So this resets your engage meter. Yeah, favorite food. When a unit eats a packed lunch, fills the engage meter. So this is at least decent. Now, there's reasons why I don't think it's that good, because, you know, you get to use it once. Maybe if you're doing some kind of DLC, LTC, it's really good because what you can do is burn through an Edelgard ring. You know, use all of your attacks, use like Hazard Unite Plus, Raging Storm, and then Atrocity to get like 3 kills, and then use this, in which case it would move up. But for general play, I would say it's okay. It could be used on certain builds to like speed up your general play, like maybe you want to reset your Byleth Dancer immediately, but you could also just have like a Brave Weapon or just get attacked a bunch of times. There's different ways to reset. Fortify also can like reset a unit like in a 1 turn. If you heal, you know, 6 things, you'll reset your bar, and you can do that every time 6 things are damaged on your team. So there's other ways of resetting, but this could be okay. I don't think it would be good because it's too situational, and unless you're doing some kind of fast level of play, it's not really the best thing. Its availability is also questionable. You can only get it like early game on some of the early units, so it's not really the best thing, but depending on how fast you want to play, I could see it being good, just for resetting 1 engage meter. Now, the build with Boone on this, you know, trying to keep the pack lunch based on his lock, that's kind of a meme. It's too unreliable and unpredictable. You could try to fix the numbers on that, but I don't think it's very good. Lost and Found, as a passive you're unlocking, it just builds support between units. It's like here. Mentorship, this can be useful to speed up the rate at which things level up, but outside of that, at most you'll be like +1 level on other things, maybe 2 if you level up, if you get enough XP. It does scale the amount of XP you get. I used to use this before the well because there wasn't really much else, but it's kind of not worth it, kind of worth it for some units. What is this? Or not unyielding, Perceptive. So if unit attacks, grants avoid +30, increases with high speed, and that's +1 avoid per 4 speed, I think. So Perceptive is kind of like avoid plus, but really it's like player phase only, so I'll put it in C tier. Okay. Let's see, Bow Focus. Bow Focus, I don't know. It's like, we'll put it in low C tier. There's some units who use bows that want the accuracy. You do get incoming crit rate, which is questionable. So let's see. Yeah, it's the same as the others. Up to hit +30. It is cheap. So if you want cheap bow accuracy, like this is your ticket essentially. Break defense, I'll say is good. It's kind of expensive, but breaking something and then getting an extra attack is at least decent because it improves your damage, right? So it's a pretty decent damage increase. Arm shield, I think is okay. It could be better. So the problem with arm shield is that it doesn't hit that many things. Like depending on what class you're running, what weapons you're running, you need weapon advantage, right? So here, let me just pull it up. All right, arm shield. When unit has weapon advantage, unit takes less damage. Now, one thing that could be interesting, but only all right, so here's the problem with this. The best weapon that has the most advantages is Martial Master, like fists. So you get reduced damage from daggers, bows, and tomes, but you don't get reduced damage from anything else. In Arm Shield, I'm pretty sure Arm Shield plus costs like 2k SP. So it's basically just like Resolve. Let's see. Oh, it's only 600. Okay, it's very cheap actually. So it's 600 SP. So it is cheap. So it's cheap, but it's very situational. So like, let's say you're on like, I don't know, like a Great Knight or something, and you have lances and swords. So you could situationally tank certain enemies a little bit better, but that's basically just worse than Gentility. It is very cheap though. So situationally on certain units, they could tank slightly better. It's too, I think it's too specific. I think that's its problem, because like as soon as you start encountering things that you don't get damage reduction against, you just start taking way too much damage, and that's really the problem with it. Now on Leaf, as a free passive, when he changes your weapons to give you advantage, that's where it can become good, because then he can actually actively switch your weapons, which would help you tank. So in that situation, it's probably better, but if you're running Leaf, you get this for free. Divine Pulse. Some people swear by this thing. Personally, I think it's terrible, and I think builds that rely on it tend to be terrible, but it at least has a use case, so I'll put it in C tier. People use it to hit fix like offensive staves in base game, and then they also use it to hit fix like Mage Cannoneer. But if your unit's so inaccurate they need to rely on this, just run a different unit. That's all right. Dodge plus 30. I'll put this in low C tier. This just gives you crit avoid. So if you want to reduce crits or tank better, that's what this does. Healing Light as a passive to unlock, I think is like D tier. It heals you when you heal things, which can be useful, but your healer shouldn't really be getting hit. So it's whatever. Health Plus. Actually, I think Health Plus is pretty good. It's kind of underrated. Getting like Health Plus 15 is a pretty big deal. And it just increases your durability. Now, maybe it's B tier. Let me put it down to like low B tier. Because like you're better off reducing damage. And the reason for that is if you get hit like 5 times and you reduce damage by 5, that's essentially plus 25 health. So there's better things, but it's still useful, and the early ranks of it are very cheap to get like plus 10 health. This is really good on like Hortensia, who's already really fast. And if she gets hit, she dies. This prevents her from getting one shot, so that way she doesn't get doubled from her base speed, and then she doesn't get one shot because she now has enough health. So that's like a good thing for her. Dex Plus. This is very expensive. Honestly, it's just okay. It's really good on certain Dex builds. It also gives you hit increase and a little bit of crit, but it's just decent. It's just okay. It's not even good because it's very expensive. If it was cheaper, I'd put it in B tier, maybe A tier. Luck Plus. So this is mostly used for like Ana or luck triggers. I would say this is also okay. It's not overpowered. It's not really good. It just increases the rate at which Ana makes you money, basically. And there's better passives for her, but if you really want her to be making you money, you can run Byleth on her, and that's usually enough. It gives you enough luck just from equipping Byleth. All right, Res plus 5. Or I'm sorry, is this Defense plus 5 or Res plus 5? Or that's Defense plus 5. All right, so Res plus 5. Res plus 5. So this is quite cheap. Could be good on some tanks. I'll put it in low B tier. Now Defense plus 5 I think is kind of similar. Maybe it's a little bit better. I feel like there's more physical damage than magical damage in this game. More things hit you with physical. So Defense plus 5 is very cheap. Res plus 5 is like I think the same cost. But this is generally going to be more useful. And more threats that double. Like there's almost no mages that double you unless you're very slow. So most of the threats that double you are physical. And most of the threats in general are physical. And the biggest mage threats are like Bolganones. I don't think there's very many Excaliburs. It's mostly Bolganones and Thorons late game. Silence Ward prevents you from being silenced. This is a good utility. I'll put this in like high B tier. This is good because it's like 200 SP and you can just equip it as needed for like the few maps you need it. So it's there if you want it. If not, you can ignore it. But it's a good utility. Tome Precision. So this one's interesting. The problem with it is I feel like Ivy wants this the most. So you get up to hit avoid plus 15 when using a tome, and it's on Celica. So Ivy can't use Celica until late. So you kind of miss out on this like really good tool to help Ivy, who's like the best tome user in the game. And Pandreo doesn't need this. Honestly, I'm gonna put this in C tier. I can see the value for avoid tanking later, but its availability is really poor. Maybe I'll put it in low B to be fair. Like if Pandreo used this, he would be using it for the avoid tanking. It would help him avoid tank. And Pandreo can avoid tank pretty well, so his passive enables it, this would enable it, give him some other avoid things, and he's good to go. Unyielding, I think this is bad. It's probably better than some of these though, like high D tier. You just get health. So here's what it does. If you're at 20%, 30%, and 40% health, if you're below that, you get that much health back. So if you're at like 30% health and you have Unyielding plus plus, you get 40% health back when your turn starts. So it just heals you when your turn starts, which is okay. I would say it's just good to have for free on Marth, but outside of that, it's not really that useful. Build plus 5. I think this is A tier. It's really useful because you can get build plus 4 very early on certain units that need it for like Levin swords, like Ana as an example. Build plus 4 and eventually build plus 5 is the same as running speed plus 5 on units whose weapon weight is always going to be 4 to 5 higher than their build stat. So getting build plus 4 on like Ana early if she's going to be on Levin sword It's actually pretty decent. So you can't go wrong with that. Was it Headstrong? Or no, what is this? Or no. Headlong Rush. I don't know why I thought it was Headstrong. All right, Headlong Rush. Immunity to freeze. This, I would say, is A tier. There's a lot of maps where freeze is a huge pain to deal with, and this just removes it from you, and it's very cheap. I believe it's only 200 SP. So even just unlocking this on certain units early, yeah, it's 200 SP. Unlocking this early and just equipping it on some of the maps where that's an annoyance can be very useful. Like Chapter 23 comes to mind, where there's just a bunch of things that spam freeze. Chapter 16 has some things that spam freeze. Corrin's Paralog has some things that spam freeze. Some other Paralogs have freeze enemies. And there's some other endgame maps that have freeze enemies. So granting immunity to freeze is useful for 200 SP. It's pretty cheap, especially with the well. This is a really good utility that you use it on certain maps, and that's it. But it's better than the silence because there's more freeze things, and this affects more units. So this is just a little bit more value. What is this? Hit plus 30? Hit plus 30, I would say, is like mid B tier. It's kind of expensive, and if a unit needs it, you're usually better off just going an engraving route to get accuracy increase. So there's a lot of engravings that improve hit rates, and that's the cheapest way, and it also doesn't use a passive slot. But if you do use this, I would say it's like B tier, maybe C tier. Alright, Unholy Stance. So this one is bad early on. You can only get base rank, reflect up to 10% damage, but at Unholy Stance plus, you flip 50% damage back to Corrupted. I would say this is like mid B tier. It could be good. The problem with it is, if you're tanking a lot of damage, you're reducing damage. So if you're only getting hit for like 5 to 10, you're only flipping back half of that at the highest rank. And I think the highest rank is like, I want to say 1k. Let's see. Holy Stance plus. Yeah, 1k SP. Nice. I remember that. So 1k SP to deal half damage back. Now, if you're just taking one big hit on like a unit in general each turn, that can help set up kills. It's not the best tool, but I could see like certain off-tank builds that get hit by like 2 to 3 enemies for like moderate, like 10 to 20 damage, and then tank it. That could be valuable, because then you're flipping all that damage back, and it's guaranteed damage. It always flips it. There's no chance for it to fail. So it is kind of, it's interesting. The only unfortunate thing is the best builds either blaze through the end game, which is when you'd be using this, or they like tank the end game through avoid tanking, bonded shield, mitigation tanking, and this doesn't really play into any of that. But it could still be useful. It's still decent and it's cheap, so. Dagger Mastery, I think that's what it's called. It's like the same thing as the Tome, or no, Knife Precision? The Knife Precision? Yeah, Knife Precision. Hit avoid plus 15 using a knife, and it's tied to Leaf. So it says great availability. This can be good on your Thieves. I would say it's like low B tier. Thieves usually have good hit rates, and like dagger units. You could use this on Marin to try to make her a dodge tank on Wolf Knight, but then she needs damage fixing from something. And she gets avoid plus 5 from being near 2 females, so that's avoid plus 20. Maybe this is low A tier. Maybe there's some Wolf Knight builds that leverage this well, that are avoid tank builds. Momentum and Momentum Plus. So Momentum Plus is useless unless you have insane movement, because Momentum works up to 10 move. So if you get 10 move, you get plus 10 damage, and Momentum Plus just extends it, so any excess beyond 10 move. So really just you're looking at Momentum. Momentum, I would say, is like B tier. I'll put it near like Break Defense. I feel like it's similar to Break Defense in that you get, here, let me try zooming out. There we go. It's similar to Break Defense in that you get some bonus damage, but it's kind of conditional. It's easy to get the bonus damage, but there's better sources of bonus damage, so it kind of just wastes a slot. It can be useful on Thoron pokers to boost their damage up a little bit, or units that like single hits. It's a pretty cheap damage boost. Roughly speaking, you're getting plus 5 damage. Whatever your move is and however tiles you move is how much damage you get. And if an enemy's right next to you, you can always move 4. You can wrap around them and it counts. So like you move 4 tiles around them, you go up 1, over 2, down 1, counts as 4 move, plus 4 damage. If you have 1 to 2 range, you can easily wrap around enemies and move an extra tile. After you get behind them, that's 5 move. So there's ways to get the damage, to squeeze the damage out, even if, you know, you don't want to move a lot. You just want to like move in like a circle. That's like a way to get it. So it's not bad. I think there's just better options though. Pair up, I feel like it's kind of similar. It can be good, and some builds do benefit from it. Just, you know, nullifying chain attack damage. I don't think it's really that useful though. I feel like if you're getting killed by chain attacks, your enemy phase build just isn't killing, and the chain attackers are living, and that's really the issue. Because all you have to do if your enemy phase build kills is just move the unit back a tile. Because then when they get attacked by a chain attacker, you kill them, and then when more things attack you, the chain attackers are dying as they're attacking you. That's what you want to be doing. So I've never had this issue where I needed pair up ever in all the tanking builds I've run across multiple units with different emblems. Resonance plus, this is okay. So all right, so here's what it does. It gives you plus damage. It's true damage. It's tomes only. If your HP is 2 or more, lose 1 HP at the start of combat. This includes enemy phase. Deal plus 2 damage, and then Resonance plus is plus 3 damage, and you still lose 1 HP. Now, Resonance plus is 3k SP. Magic plus is also 3k SP for Magic plus 3. And that just doesn't lose you health. So now reducing the health could be useful for someone like Citrine, who can use items and then it AoE heals. So that could be useful, but by the time you would even like get this, I mean, you could unlock it on her early if you really wanted it. So that is an option, but I don't think it's really that good. I think it's just okay. Staff Mastery. So this increases hit rate with offensive staves and also increases heal. I think this is like high B tier, maybe like here. It's definitely valuable. It's cheap. You can get it early on some like staff units like Fram or something. So Staff Mastery, I think is the name. You get up to hit plus 30 with offensive staves and then plus 15 health. So what I would do is I would get Staff Mastery 3, so you heal for an additional 7. And then hit plus 20, so that way your offensive staffs, if you're using them, are pretty good, and then your healing is also much better. And this also affects Fortify too. So if you're looking to make a Fortify build, and you want to reset a lot of damage units, getting Staff Mastery 5 and using Fortify would heal them for base 15 plus like whatever Fortify heals for, so it's pretty good. Sword Agility. Honestly, I think this could be considered metagame. I think all the avoid stuff, I think these could be considered metagame because they're so broken, they trivialize the game. Not getting hit in a game where dying matters, not getting hit is really good. And these enable some of the dumbest, most brainless builds that allow you to just send a unit in, enemies refuse to attack them, or if they do, they have like 5 to 10 hit rate, and just tank anything. And just kill anything. And their downside of like this has no downside except for availability, same with this, but you can get avoid, you can get sword avoid plus 20 or general avoid plus 20 early game with Welling, and you can get this from Erica mid game. It has great availability, so you could run this on any lance unit. You can run this on like maybe 1 or 2 early units, but the avoid plus 30 and avoid plus 20 early, and then eventually they cap out at plus 30. It's pretty crazy. Like avoid plus 20 on like Fram or Alir, and then making that a bonded shield unit makes it unhittable pretty easily. So that in of itself breaks the game. But these are really strong. All right, so let's go to Magic. Magic plus, I think it's low A tier. Magic is one of the best sources of damage in the game. Tomes are really strong. Levin Sword is really strong. Radiant Bow is really strong. All these things are really strong. And boosting magic damage. Now it does cost, I think Magic plus 5 is 5k SP, but there isn't a tome power. So if you just want plus 5 damage for 5k SP on your mages, on your tomes, this is pretty much like the only way to get it. Now it obviously is after chapter 20 when you get Celica back, but it's still pretty good. It's still pretty easy to get. Reposition. I'll put this in high A tier. So if you're like an LTC or you're concerned with like efficient play, this is probably S tier, but if you're just like a general player and you just want some utility, it's cheap and it's great. It just moves a unit over a unit. So if you have a unit on your left side, you want to flip them over to your right side, you can do that, and it moves them 2 tiles effectively. So you can basically accelerate a unit's position by 2, and then you can also canto afterwards. So if you want to do some repositioning games, it can be quite good. Dual assist plus, I think it's high A tier. I don't think it's metagame. I don't think it's the best thing in the game or one of the best things, but it is really strong. And if you run a bunch of these, any attack can turn into a kill or just high damage. But yeah, and also like if you're doing like super aggressive play, these still have to be within range. It has to be within attack range, like if it can move an attack to like the enemy unit. So if you have your team split up and your dual assist isn't close enough, like they're too far away for this to trigger, it can be whatever. And also, you generally want to be at full health because I'm assuming you're going for the Brave Assist on Hero. That's usually who uses this. So you have to manage health. So it's not as good as it seems, but it is still decent when used correctly. Resolve Plus, I think, is metagame as well. I think it's a little bit better than these. So if you're playing like hyper aggressive, maybe this isn't S tier, but if you're just playing like 10 to 20 turns per map, which I would say is like the average, this is really good. It allows your tanky units to become more tanky, and it's relatively cheap. So you get +5 defense and res at 75% HP or lower, or +7 defense and res at that threshold. So if you have tanky units or units that are on tanky classes, this enables them to tank even more, reducing the damage even further as they start taking damage. And with the right build, it can make you take like 1 to 5 damage per hit and tank like 5 to 10 enemies at a time. And it's really cracked. Strength Plus, I'll put below Magic Plus because Magic is a little bit better. But it does go up to 6, and I think it costs you 6k SP though. Gentility Plus, I think, is one of the best skills in the game. So this gives you tanking and damage. So the way it works is for 2k SP, you get -3 damage taken, and this includes enemy engage attacks like Lodestar Rush and stuff like this. It reduces any damage source, no matter what it is, except for like maybe fire damage when you're standing in fire. But it reduces damage taken for 2k SP, and then if the Erica unit you have on your team switches modes, they deal +3 damage at all times. So for 2k SP, you have an optional mode of -3 damage and +3 damage that you can flip like a switch permanently. Like when you switch from Erica to Ephraim mode, you always have Bravery. And if that Erica unit is engaged or constantly engages, like if they're using like a brave weapon and they can reset and just keep engaging, like let's say they have like 1 to 2 turns of downtime, so they're usually engaged 4 out of 6 turns, you're always -3 damage taken, +3 damage dealt. And it gets even better when you get Gentility Plus for 3k SP, which is also quite cheap. You get +5 damage, -5 damage. So when you have your Erica unit engaged, like 4, like at least 3, well, let's say 4 to like 4 out of 6 to 4 out of 7 turns, even if it was half the time, you're looking at like +5 damage, -5 damage half the time, or -5 damage, +5 damage 100% of the time. Like you're always going to be you're always either going to be on Erica or Ephraim mode. So depending on if you need more tanking or if you need more damage, you can always have the damage, you can always have the tanking. But the advantage here is when that unit engages, you get both. And if that unit is engaged, if you dance the Erica unit and it has a Brave Sword, you can keep it engaged like 4 to 5 out of 6 turns. It's really stupid. Like you can easily do that. Because what you do is you have an attack, get a kill, you dance it, you have an attack, get a kill. If it's Brave Swording or like Brave attacking, you get 1 bar built, like you get 1 meter per hit. So a single Brave attack gives you 4 out of like the 6 bars, and then if you dance, you just hit twice. Also, if you get hit, you get a bar. So if you hit twice, then get hit twice, kill, that's 5 of your meter recharge for Erica. Then you dance that unit, then they just need to hit anything or use a staff or whatever, build up that last meter, and then engage next turn. So you can have like 5 out of 6, or I'm sorry, 4 out of 5, I should say, because you can only be engaged 4 turns. So you're engaged 4 turns, and then your downtime is 1 turn. So you can keep this up, like with basic play, and every Gentility unit benefits. It's also it's good on tanks, it's good on mages, it's good on wolf knights, it's good on literally every build in the game. It gives you damage and tanking, it's really good. Bravery, it's the same thing. I'll just put it next to it. Well, actually, no, let's keep it clean. All right, Canter. Definitely one of the best skills in the game. Repositioning after taking action is really good. Very often, just by virtue of moving like 1 or 2 tiles, you either avoid getting counterattacked or you drastically reduce the amount of enemies that can counterattack. So units that can't tank can get in, hit, get out safely, get in, hit, get out, and then just tank 1 enemy, and most units can tank 1 enemy. Also with flyers, it allows you to get out of bounds, like for flyer only tiles. So hit something, go to flyer only tiles, laugh at the enemies who can't hit you. Holdout plus 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 plus. Holdout as a passive, not on Roy, I would say is like high A tier. I don't recommend getting it, honestly. I know some people like it. If you're doing an Iron Man, I could see it being really good. But for like general play, it is strong. But it's not something, maybe it's a little bit worse than Dual Assist. It's not something I recommend getting. Alright, Lance Power. Lance Power. Here, let me do all the powers and just get this, we'll address this. Alright, so which is best? Alright, I think this is the order. I think Sword Power is the best because of Levin Sword. I think Lance Power is the second best because Lances tend to have good accuracy, weight, and might. So they tend to be really good on units that don't have really high con or build. And Axes of these are the worst because very few Axe units are also fast, and most of the good Axes outside of like the Well Axe and the Hero Axe are light enough for these fast units to double with consistently without seeing a speed penalty. The only units who can really double with Axes without speed penalty are like Boucheron, Diamant, maybe Pandreo. His build is high enough, maybe. I haven't tried him on a physical class. Not sure how it would go, but those other two for sure. But this is like the order. So, all right, so why are these S tier? Plus 10 damage per hit. If you hit twice, it's plus 20 damage. If you hit 4 times the Brave Weapon, it's plus 40 damage. It's completely insane. These are like some of the best killing tools in the game. I put them below Canter because Canter is good on pretty much everything, whereas these are only good on combat units. Same thing with Gentility. Because Gentility also increases tanking. While, like, it helps scale the damage of things like, you know, Ivy on Tomes, Pandreo on Tomes, Anna on Tomes, on like Mage Knights, Lindworm, and so on. Also gives Ivy more tanking, which allows her to be more bulky, which she already has high health, high defense, and high res. So this just really enables one of the best units in the game, as well as, you know, like Pandreo and Anna. Also other things, anything using Levin Sword, it could run this. Now obviously Sword Power would be better. This does have better availability though. Sword Power, you have to get Roy back. So that's like one of the big issues, right? So depending on how much damage you need, this could be better, but this, I think you get more value. It's also cheaper. 3k SP for plus 5 damage. It would be 3k SP for plus 6 damage, but you also lose 10 avoid. So this is also better for dodging, I think. Lunar Brace, I think Lunar Brace is just A tier. Player phase only physical damage, booster damage, can enable one rounding on certain builds and certain units. But all of like these are enemy phase, this is enemy phase, so it's more flexible. So that's what boosts it up in my opinion. Speed plus 5, I think this is like one of the best things in the game. Speed plus 5 is just really good. You get plus 10 avoid, which is already good, and you get more speed. You know, more speed means better doubling, more doubling. In some cases, you can double really fast enemies, or at the very least, avoid being doubled by everything, and then double medium speed and slow enemies, and it's quite strong. It's very good. Speed Taker. Actually, I'm sorry, I skipped Quality Time. Quality Time? I think Quality Time is S tier. It's good on utilities. So use it on, let's say you have like a Thoron unit, right? You have, let's say a Citrine and like, I don't know, some other staff bot. Like let's say you have Citrine and Saline and you want them to be Thoron units that have crit engravings, crit/hit engravings on their Thorons. So like a Byleth and like a Lyn on one and the other. And you give them one Draconic Hex, you give one Canter, and then you can give them Quality Time. So Quality Time is just free chip healing. It heals for 5 to all adjacent. It's really good on Canter units, so if you have like Canter Quality Time, you can attack something like with a Thoron unit or a Longbow unit, debuff it. So you could run like Sigurd, Draconic Hex quality time on a Thoron poker, debuff an enemy, canter, and then heal for 5, and then if you get quality time plus, you heal for 10. So this healing for 10 resets chain guards, so if you're using chain guarders, it resets them. But if you have like 2 to 3 units constantly healing adjacent allies for 5 to 10 health a turn, that adds up, especially when you add in Curious Dance, which is 10% within 1 to 2 range per turn from your dancer. And especially good on the dancer, because you dance something, canter out, quality time, and then you Curious Dance. So he can heal like 10 health to up to 4 adjacent, and then 10% up to whatever the 1 to 2 range would be. I think it's like 9 or 12 or something. But he can heal a lot of things, and you can use this on your utilities and your staff bots. It's just a constant source of healing. And if you have like 3 of these things, you can heal units to full health without ever actually using the heal command. And that saves you turns. That's just efficient. That's just really good. That's a very useful passive. It's also cheap. Speed Taker. I think it's safe to say Speed Taker's S tier. I haven't been using it lately, but there is a huge advantage over Speed Taker versus Speed plus 5, and that advantage is SP cost, or I'm sorry, the SP cost is the same. The advantage is the bond fragment cost. Getting Speed plus 5, all right, there's first of all, there's 2 things. One, you need to do Lin Paralog, which is a hard paralog, especially if you're new to the game. If you're not, it's not that bad. But you have to complete Lin's Paralog, and you have to get your bond level up to like 19 or 18 to get Speed plus 5. The SP cost is the same. The cap, the potential is better on Speed Taker, but you shouldn't run too many of them. I would say at most you should run 2 to 3, and one of those should be your Lin unit. So really you should run like 2 plus a Lin, and that should be your main combat units, because you get up to Speed plus 10, which is Avoid plus 20, and Speed plus 10 is better than Speed plus 5. But the startup cost of setting up kills is why I think Speed plus 5 is overall better, but this is still really good, and honestly I should probably start using it more. It's really good because you do eventually run out of bond fragments unless you do a ton of fishing, which I find so mind-numbingly boring. I can't do it. Because every time I fish, I get like 50 bond fragment fish. So like all right, so here's the difference in bond fragments. 500 bond fragments, several thousand bond fragments, like 6,000 to 7,000 bond fragments to get Speed plus 5 versus Speed Taker. So running Speed Taker saves you bond fragments so that you can, invest in other things, because these high lance powers and this stuff like this costs high levels of bond fragments to unlock if the unit isn't using the emblem. So something to keep in mind. Now you can pass Lin around to get to Speed plus 5 for cheap, to get those bond levels up for cheap, but then you're constantly switching builds and need to remember you're switching Lin around, and that can mess you up. So I kind of don't recommend that. This is just part of Lunar Brace. Let's see, Dual Assist. Dual Assist is better than the other Avoid things because it scales better. It's kind of cheap. I think it's like bond level 14, so its fragment cost is a little bit lower actually than these because you don't have to max out the bond. So it's like bond level 13, 14. And what it does is every A rank support the unit has gives Avoid plus 20. So if you're sitting next to 4 A rank supports, your Avoid plus 80, also known as not gonna get hit ever, especially if you're fast. So I used this in my flyer only run and it was completely broken. I was able to dodge tank pretty much anything the game threw at me, and the best they had was like 10 to 20 hit rate with like 160 to 180 hit enemies. So it's pretty cracked. It's pretty cheap too. I think it's only 2k SP. So it's basically the best Avoid tanking option in the game. And it's probably even better than like running Thieves, because the problem with Thieves is it's like Thieves aren't the best combat class. Like Wolf Knight is better than them, but the damage on both is quite low, even when factoring in the extra damage from forged daggers. So like it basically enables anything to become an Avoid tank as long as it's near the right allies. And you start adding in things like quality time, and it just starts getting really silly. Like the game starts playing itself. All right, and then all right, that's Alacrity. This is Vantage. All right, Vantage. Vantage, I think, is strong. I don't think it's as good as Avoid tanking or mitigation tanking, but it is still really good. The problem with Vantage... All right, so here's the Vantage build. Wrath, Holdout, Vantage, crit build. Typically Panette, sometimes Saphir, sometimes Rafal. Those are like the main targets of this build. Maybe there's some Kagetsu build out there that runs it as well. Generally, if you're not on Leaf, it's a one range enemy phase build. And there are situations where you can one range enemy phase. However, if you start getting hit by 2 and 3 range when using this build, you're gonna die. Because you won't, the way the build survives is that you stay at low HP, you get crit from Wrath, you have holdout as a get out of jail free card just in case they do hit you, so you can at least survive one hit. And you can also use holdout to get to low health, so you can die on purpose, get to like 1 HP, and then just like heal up to like roughly a little bit below half. So that way you have your plus 30 crit from Wrath, or whatever you need. And then for Vantage, you need to be at certain health thresholds to attack before the enemy does. So when they attack you, you hit them first, you hit them with a crit, they die. That's the idea. However, if you are using Roy or Ike as your main emblems when doing this, Roy gives you holdout for free. He also gives you increased stats. Ike gives you half damage. So Ike, you have more survivability if you do get hit at 2 and 3 range, and then Roy, you have the holdout for free. So if you do get hit, you can at least survive one combat and get put at 1 HP, and then the second ranged attack will kill you. This is less reliable than most enemy phase builds that use power, gentility, void tanking, whatever, because those have, you know, really high avoid so you never get hits, or really high stats, so even if you do get hit, you take like no damage. They can also 1 to 2 range. Now the 1 to 2 range version of this, you run a killer axe and a killer bow, and it's generally a Panette build, and you run Leaf, and you keep the bond level low so that she adapt abilities in between those, and then she can 1 to 2 range, but she still needs to be at low thresholds, and she can still get poked by Thorons and killed, or longbows, depending on what she has. Now you could also put a crit longbow on her, but it would be like 60 to 70 crit roughly, because longbow has no innate crit. So you would crit engrave it, you'd get plus 30 from Wrath, plus 10 from her passive, and she would be like 50 to 70 crit, maybe even 40 at sometimes. But that would be like the best enemy phase build. It's also kind of conditional and would require you to manage her health and positioning well. I still think chain attack, I don't know if chain attacks kill you. I think you do hit before those, so, but it's definitely not as strong as just sending a unit in and the build just takes care of everything for you. There's more maintenance to it. So I can't put it in S tier as a result. Like if it was super brainless and it was easy to use and the result was as good, like the result can be as good as these, but it's harder to use. So that just makes it worse in my opinion. Draconic Hex, easy S tier. Let's put it like here. This sets up boss kills. This sets up kills in general. If you have Draconic Hex and you're using something like Sigurd and you override, it hexes every single thing you hit. Any multi-hit, including like Ike, AoE, any AoE attack with Draconic Hex applies Draconic Hex to every enemy that's struck by it, which is pretty sick. Also, you can do something that's really cool with Lyn, where you can Astra Draconic Hex. So I actually did this in I think my second Maddening run. I had a unit on Lyn with Draconic Hex, use Astra Storm on Lumera in chapter 25 or 25 or whatever, and it debuffed her. So it works with all engage abilities. I think it even works with like Warp Ragnarok. So you can debuff at range, you can AoE debuff. Generally speaking, as soon as you debuff something, it takes 4 more damage from magic and physical. It loses 4 speed, and it loses like hit rate, and it loses damage. So you tank it better, it tanks you worse. You double it better, it doubles you worse. It's really good. It's definitely one of the best passives. You should run at least 1 unit plus a Corrin that has this, and their whole job should just be debuffing things. For the most part, like there's different ways to play. You don't need it. You don't need any of these, but it's really nice to have, and it always helps you kill bosses. All right, Wrath. I would say Wrath as a passive. For me personally, I think it's high A tier. All right, and these are just like the opposite modes of Gentility and Lunar Brace. I think it's A tier. Like the builds that use it typically just player phase 1 round, which is very achievable by a lot of different builds. If like to me, player phase 1 rounding is like A/B tier. That's like the baseline of what a build should do if it's a killing build. Now, if it does other things like tanks, dives, debuffs, adds utility, like some of these things. I think it's better, but I feel like it's more, I think it's easier to get kills with these than it is to get kills with this, for the most part. Like Levin sword power is like one of the strongest things in the game, and it's just so effortlessly good on Griffin Knight, on Mage Knight, that I think it just outperforms Wrath builds, because it does everything the Wrath build does, in that it one rounds on player phase and enemy phase, but just enemy phase is better, and it's just more reliable, and you don't have to HP fix the unit. You don't have to constantly worry about if Curious Dance is hitting your Wrath unit, if Quality Time is hitting your Wrath unit, if you're going to use Fortify for a turn to like build up an engage meter, if that's going to hit your Wrath unit. I just don't like playing around this condition. Now, if you really like playing around Wrath, that's fine. There are builds that are good. I think the Leaf build is probably the best use case because it can enemy phase and player phase. If you're just going for like super fast play, I don't even think it's good. Because like, how do you hit fix? Like if you're if you're going for one turns for like endgame stuff, I don't even think it's used in there. So I would rather have just like raw damage and speed if I was just going for one rounding, like killing on the first turn or something. This is where I think Wrath is. It is really good. There are builds that leverage it. I think there's fewer builds that leverage this than there are that leverage this, because these are so universal. These are so generic too. Like any axe, any lance, any sword, doesn't matter what it is, benefits from these, and it's plus 10 damage a hit. So if you're doubling, you're dealing plus 20 damage. Now obviously crit is 3 times damage, but the might on most crit weapons is low, except for like the well axe, which does have really high might. So that's like an exception to the rule. But the killer axe's might is whatever, it's decent. It's not the best. Typically only high strength units can really one-shot anyways. But this, I find these way more reliable than this for sure. And I would rather even have gentility, because if you're doubling, it's plus 10 damage versus this. You know, the crit's nice. I don't like crit builds as much, but I haven't found them to be as effective either. Like when they work, they're decent, but they just seem more player phase oriented, and the only enemy phase one is like this really specific like Leaf Panette build or Leaf Rafal build here on DLC. But that's it for this one. Here is my updated list. I think these are the best. For like general combat, this is utility. This is good because it's weapon agnostic, plus 5 damage, minus 5 damage taken. These are good because I think speed is one of the best stats in the game. Doubling, avoiding getting hit at the same time, just really stupid. Plus 20 avoid and 10 speed is really broken. This lets you double like Wolf Knights and Griffin Knights and things you have no business doubling, which is very fun to use. So if you run this on like Chloe Griffin or something, on Levin Sword with sword power, you can get her like early sword power, like at least 1 to 2. You can get her early sword power 2, sometimes 3 if your tier 4 wells pop off early. You might have to drop the DLC silver weapons in though. There is a way to get, you'll have to buy weapons. There is a way to get tier 4 wells from buying weapons on base game. So there is that. Tier 4 Brodia usually is achievable. You get a Brave Sword. That can help you get your tier 4 wells. So you donate to Brodia level 4. That can help. But yeah, I think this is the list. A lot of these utilities are bad. I do like this distribution. This is more even. There's more things in the middle. There's a lot of S tiers, I think. Maybe Sword Avoid's a little bit worse. Maybe it's like here. I think that's fair. Resolve Plus I do think is really good. I think this is a thing people sleep on. I think the rest of this is quite good. So yeah, that's it for this one. Definitely let me know if you agree or disagree with these and why. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.